Almost 1 million people, that is the number that is estimated, the top end, 1 million people additional to this country in net migration. I'm just going to cut straight to the chase. First and foremost, this is way off forecast, depending on whose forecast you believe. Do you think it's manageable?
I think that most forecasts in this country, whether it be about migration in an example like this, or indeed the Bank of England's forecast, which said we were going to be going into recession and now we're not yet again, tend to be off to the detriment of the standing of the government of the day. And we are like Charlie Brown running up to kick the football, always believing that Lucy will hold it in place and forever falling on our collective behinds, because we then let them tell us another set of predictions and go along as if they are true. I don't think that migration at this rate, on a sustained basis, is actually something that the country can bear. Not because we haven't got enough room in the country necessarily, this is a big island, but because migration is something that assimilates into a culture slowly and integrates into a culture slowly, and we are building a totally inadequate level of housing. And if you take together those 2 points, that we're effectively ghettoising newcomers. I'm not talking about refugees or asylum seekers now, I'm talking about people coming illegally, but winding up, mostly legally, but winding up in effective ghettos of parts of the UK in totally inadequate housing. If you take those two things together, it's not sustainable. And if you look at the other extreme of this, and the example is ahead of us, Angela Merkel said in Germany that there was no limit to the number of refugees and asylum seekers that her country would take. It turned out that wasn't true. The limit was about 1.5 million, and they wound up with huge numbers of people, basically with a satellite camp made up almost entirely of migrants stuck on the side of small German towns, with no more infrastructure, no more resource, and no real prospect ever of integrating into the community they've been dumped next to. So I'm afraid I don't think it's sustainable, and I think that it's going to be probably the main issue at the next election.
Scarlett?
I think you have to step back and think about why the migration. I don't know whether the figures are right. I tend to be like Alex. I think they're probably way over. But actually, there is a real issue with migration, and we see it from Ukraine. We see it at the moment with Sudan. We certainly see it as with climate change. And what we actually have to do is we have to get together, frankly, as Europe, and start saying, what are we going to do? Because what do we say? We're not going to have any of these? We think that all these people in Calais should just stay in France? Let France take them. Let Germany take them. I mean, actually, there is an international problem. We know that in Africa, that most poor African countries have masses of migrants, right? I was on holiday in Jordan. In Jordan, they took 1 million Syrian refugees, an incredibly poor country. What we need, we actually need a serious look at it, instead of being Fortress England, Fortress Britain.
But that's a UN and related bodies point, with which actually I agree. Maybe an unpopular view on this channel. I believe in us taking more legitimate asylum seekers and refugees through the routes of international organisations, effectively giving people the safe routes that are being clamoured for in this debate about Calais.
What's the driver for that? Is it more about the safety of others, or is it about, I don't know, boosting the labour market here? What drives that?
No, it's about a moral imperative for a wealthy country to do its bit. And it also would be the answer to those saying there is no safe route and therefore it's okay to pay a people smuggler, go across Europe and come across one of the busiest bodies of water in the world, putting yourself and others at risk, despite the fact we've told them not to come. So there is all of that. But actually, no disrespect meant to Scarlett, but the discussion about Calais and so forth, which is a problem, is, whilst eye-catching, in the low thousands. What we're talking about here is 1 million people coming lawfully as people who want to come and live in the UK. It's a completely different policy debate about whether there's a number at which you say, now is the time to stop. Now, I actually am in favour of free migration up to our country to decide what, and discriminating in the true sense of the meaning of the word discriminate. So to say, for example, we need more doctors for the next 5 years, make it easier for people with medical backgrounds to come to the UK. We don't need people of that background. make it, frankly, harder for people with those skills and qualifications to come. That is, in my view, entirely reasonable for a country to do, for a government to do, and it's part of why we voted for Brexit, to exercise meaningful control over our borders.
So I'm going to paraphrase, but you would agree, for example, with caps, limit caps?
I would absolutely agree that the government's entitled to have caps, and then I do it on a policy, I exercise that policy on a case-by-case basis. Right now, I think I'd exercise it.
Would you agree with caps?
I just don't think they work. I mean, David Cameron got in saying we're going to have a cap, and it's never that we're going to get down from hundreds of thousands to tens of thousands. Yeah. It's never happened. I mean, the problem with caps is they don't work. So you can have Alex's people, which is people coming for work, people coming to join their families, and then and students, right? So are we capping all of those? And then you can't cap refugees.
Well,
there is a problem.
I think it was Theresa May who insisted that students counted in the immigration cap. For me, it was mad. Right? You're coming for an accredited course. You're staying for a set period of time, by definition, and you should be able to be monitoring those people. They're registered with an educational institution. They pay well over the odds for the education.
Absolutely. HE depends on
either send them back or not.
And it's not just students, of course, it's the families as well, if they do decide to bring them over. One of the arguments that people will have is people will perhaps look back to 2004 when the EU expanded and the UK, the Labour government, made that decision that, right, what we're going to do, we're not going to put any transitional controls when it comes to access to the labour market. We'll just do a huge free-for-all. I think they estimated top end about 13,000 people would come. In 1 year alone, it was about 112,000 people.
Yeah, it was a mistake. I mean, there's no question that what happened with Romania and Bulgaria coming into the EU was that Tony Blair was told, as you said, I mean, I think he was told 50,000 and it was 500,000. He was certainly given the wrong figure. He thought it wasn't going to be a problem. It was a problem. It was certainly a policy mistake. No question about it.
When you say we need to talk to Europe, you know, that was back when we were, you know, in literally a political union with Europe, and they still didn't seem to realise that other countries like Germany, they use maximum transitional controls. They blocked their labour market for 7 years.
But we could have done.
Yeah, we could have done,
yeah,
and
we didn't.
And we chose not to, right? And so actually we can't blame Europe for that.
Look, I'm a profound Brexiteer, and I don't. That was a decision very badly made by the Labour government of the day. But I would make this other point. Whilst we got the benefit of some very good people coming and being labourers and craftsmen in our country, whether they were from Bulgaria or Romania or indeed Poland, a lot of those people returned to their home markets during coronavirus and or around and after the Brexit period. The extent to which Labour now effectively says we want to have a more open situation and bring people like that back, effectively suppressing wages and flooding the labour market again, would be a real mistake for their own core vote. Because one of the things that's been neglected in this country is the left-wing case for leave. You basically never heard it on the airwaves, but it was the traditional trade union, Michael Foot, Tony Benn position on the left, which is that we should be out of the EU, not only because it's a corporatist stitch-up done in the interest of big businesses and big banks, they weren't completely wrong, but also because it harms our own working-class vote, who get their wages suppressed by people willing to come here and work for less. They weren't completely wrong, you know.
But this notion that caps don't work, Scarlett, I just want to push you on that a little bit, because to me, a cap would work. It's the lack of... I want to say a word that I can't say at tea time, but it's the lack of desire to implement those caps, because it's not beyond the wit of man to sit there and say, right, do you know what, Manchester, the population of Manchester is about, I don't know, 500,000 there or thereabouts, whatever. So that was the net migration last year, so we've already added Manchester, another Manchester, to the UK. So next year we just cannot sustain that. Housing, schools, roads, whatever. So actually, I'll come up with a figure, I don't know, if I was Rishi Sunak, let's just say 200,000. And then I'll say, right, you can have X amount of students, X amount of this, X amount of that, and full stop. And then you implement it.
So it doesn't work.
Why?
The reason it doesn't work is the minute you say you can have X amount of students, you'll get the higher education institutes. I mean, as Alex said, they rely on foreign students because foreign students pay so much. So we've already got an argument about foreign students. So there's that. Then there's we need people for the labour market, right? That we need. I mean, we need more doctors. We need
about
more
400,000
nurses.
off our pre-COVID heights.
right.
But then that force industries to be quite creative in the way that they're training and recruiting. You've got about
but we need them now.
But you've got about 5 million people in this country sitting in out-of-work benefits. Get them lot incentivised to get into the world of work.
Actually, most of the people who are on out-of-work benefits cannot work for one reason or another.
I bet there's a massive chunk that can.
I find that quite unlikely, just on the sheer numbers.
Well, what was it? The Spectator looked at it and said the real problem is long-term health problems. Why have we got long-term health problems? Because nobody can get a wretched operation, right? And by the time you get it, you know, your hip or your knee operation, you're so used to.
You've had it.
So there's no question about. But then, so there's that. Then there's you know, families coming over, and then there's refugees. I mean, you just can't put caps on.
Well, hang on. I would regard the conversation about assisting people, especially around things like disaster relief and exceptional events, I would regard that as a separate.
So you wouldn't put that in net migration.
No, I regard this as a discussion about legal migration, which, for Michelle's purposes, the answer on a given year, I suppose, might be zero. I don't think anyone would logically advocate that.
I wouldn't want people to come to harm. No, but at the same time.
No. But I was saying on the legal migration, you might say, right, this year we don't intend to expand our population in terms of just normal migration, but there is a separate stream for asylum seeking and refugees.
Okay, a separate stream for asylum seeking. Separate stream for students?
Yeah, I'd leave students out.
Already, this net migration is actually down to people joining their families and people coming here for work, right? And
But those are two very significant streams of.
I know, and you talk to the farmers who say, we've got fruit and vegetables rotting in our fields because we haven't got the agricultural labourers. You go to the NHS.
That's because many Brits now are too burn idle to get out into the fields. Because when I was growing up, my siblings, their friends, that's what they used to do. They used to get picked up in minibuses. They used to get taken to the farms nearby where we lived in Hull, and they used to pick, I don't know what it was, cucumbers or whatever. If you said to teenagers now, right, you get in this minibus and off you pop, and you're going to sit in the greenhouses and you're going to pick, they'd laugh in your face.
Not if they wanted the money. Well, right? I mean, I think we forget how much teenagers want the money. It's not that they're all sitting around spoilt because they've got really rich parents, right? I mean, there is a cost of living crisis in this
There is
country.
a flip side to this, and it's the part of the unspoken bit of the left that I was mentioning, but it tends to be around the kinds of individuals and workspaces you were just talking about, so I think it's relevant. There are people who say, for the first time, my salary has effectively gone up because there is more pressure on an employer to make, supply and demand, to make this more attractive for people to do it. And I don't actually want to have freer labour into the UK. I want employers to feel they have to pay a proper wage for the kind of job I'm going to do. You know what? This is a traditional left-wing argument. We've switched positions.
What I'm very pleased is that we've got a minimum wage, right, so that actually wages can't be suppressed.
Gone up more times under a Conservative government than under Labour.
I'm trying not to have a sort of party political argument. I'm actually trying to say that there is a solution. But what you say, there should be a cap on net migration, but we shouldn't count refugees, shouldn't count students. We have to have people we need for work. So actually the only people that you're really saying we can't have are people joining families.
And by the way, if you're going to put a cap on, or whatever figures you want to have, there should be a complete infrastructure programme that is directly connected to population growth. So yeah, you know what, if you lot are saying caps don't work and this government insists on increasing the population by the size of Manchester and thereabouts every year, then they should commit roads, schools, GP surgeries, all the rest of it, but they're not, and therein lies the problem.